Let me tell you something I never thought I'd say. There's nothing quite like waking up to find a woman in a navy suit and pearls waving a thick legal document in your face informing you that under some ancient founding heritage clause your cabin, the one you just bought for a quarter, now belongs to the HOA and you've got 72 hours to pack your bags. Yeah, that happened. Standing there on my porch looking at Victoria Ashworth, president of the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association, with her sharp gray eyes and a little smile like she just won a state championship, I had to fight the urge to laugh. Because honestly, I'd seen this play before, and these folks didn't know what was coming. See, my name's Marcus Bennett. I'm 42 now, spent the better part of my adult life crawling through the attics and basements of Boston's oldest buildings, restoring woodwork so fine most people don't even notice it. I know my timber like a sommelier knows wine. When I left the city for a quieter life, I landed in New Hampshire hoping to buy a piece of peace and maybe a little challenge to keep me busy. Didn't expect to stumble into a forgotten auction where among a dozen sad little suburban lots, they called up Lot 47 Lakeside Cabin, 2 acres severe structural deterioration. Starting bid $1. You could almost feel the crowd rolling their eyes. But while everyone else saw rotten lumber, I saw something nobody else did: support beams made of rare American chestnut mortise and tenon joinery you just don't see outside museums, not in a throwaway cabin like this. The kind of craftsmanship where every joint feels like a secret handshake, every cut speaks of a builder who saw wood as a living thing. So I opened the bidding 25 cents just to see if anyone would bite. Auctioneer looked at me like I'd lost my mind. But rules are rules, and when no one else jumped in after 60 seconds, that gavel came down and I walked out with a property for less than a gumball. Next morning I drove out to see what I'd gotten myself into. The place was rough, sure, but the bones were sound. Every detail, every angle, every peg lined up like someone had drawn up blueprints way ahead of their time. That first day, poking around in the sunlight, I got this feeling, like maybe I'd uncovered something important. But by week 3, I realized I wasn't the only one interested. I kept spotting the same black BMW parked just far enough down the dirt road, engine idling, binoculars poking out the window. An older woman with silver hair and a city look about her, definitely not the neighborly type. She was methodical, always gone before I could get close. So I did what any halfway smart museum guy would do. I set up some cameras, started watching. Who was watching me? Turns out she wasn't alone. She came back sometimes with friends, sometimes with a younger man. This wasn't curiosity, this was reconnaissance. And then down in the old stone-walled basement, scraping away at years of dust, I found it tiny, precise carvings in the wood, not random, not vandalism, geometric patterns, botanical swirls, even star symbols, all hidden where only a true craftsperson would look. One turned into dozens, 47 all told, each tucked into a joint only visible if you knew where to look and how to take things apart. This wasn't just a house, it was a puzzle. Someone had hidden their signature in plain sight in a language you had to study for years to even recognize. That's when I realized whatever was going on here, it was way bigger than a rundown cabin. Rather than run straight to the newspapers, I started quietly documenting everything, dropping hints on Instagram, building a little audience of woodworking nerds and history buffs, seeing if anyone might connect the dots. When I sent the best photos to Dr. Eleanor Hartwell, a legend at the Smithsonian, who'd taught me half of what I know about 19th century woodwork, she called me up at midnight, voice shaking. "Marcus," she said, "what you've got matches the style of Elias Whitmore, a craftsman so elusive that even the Smithsonian only has fragments of his work. If this is really a Whitmore cabin, you're sitting on a lost American masterpiece, the kind of thing that could be worth millions." That's about when the town rumors started flying. I made sure to accidentally mention some Smithsonian buzz at the local coffee shop, called up my lawyer buddy Jake in Boston, loud enough for half the town to overhear. Within hours, everyone in Pine Ridge was whispering about the stranger with the magic cabin. Victoria wasn't having it. She called a town meeting, got everyone fired up about how I was planning to exploit their local history for profit. The whole thing felt like a show trial. But I walked right into that meeting and flipped the script. Instead of ducking, I told the whole room that what I'd found was bigger than me, that it belonged to all of us, and with the right partnerships, Pine Ridge could become a cultural destination. It was like watching the air go out of Victoria's carefully inflated argument. People started asking me questions, not her. Afterward, a little old lady with silver hair and a sparkle in her eye came up and introduced herself. Turns out this was Eleanor Hartwell, retired town librarian and local historian, keeper of secrets. She invited me to the library basement the next day and, well, let me back up a sec, that was the real twist. Down in the archives, Eleanor pulled out an old journal, pages crumbling, written by Victoria's own great-great-grandfather, Thomas Ashworth. The entries told a story of rivalry and obsession, how he'd tried and failed to buy Whitmore's land, how he'd stewed for decades, turning the cabin into a family vendetta. Over the next century and a half, the Ashworths had tried every trick in the book to get their hands on it, from shell companies to land swaps. Victoria's HOA wasn't about community stewardship. It was the final move in a generations-long game to turn Pine Ridge Lake into a rich person's resort with the cabin as the keystone. Then Eleanor pulled out Whitmore's own letter, hidden for generations. It spoke of ownership written among the stars, about art belonging to those who could truly see its beauty. Poetic right. But then Eleanor dropped the real bomb. Whitmore had been an amateur astronomer, and she suspected he'd left clues in the cabin's design that you'd only notice at night from above. So that's what we did. On a clear night with Eleanor's old star charts and my drone, we flew over the cabin and nearly dropped the controller there. It was clear as day. The roof's shingles formed the Big Dipper. The ridge pointed straight to Polaris, as it would have been in 1850. A celestial map right on top of the cabin. The trail led us to a centuries-old oak, where we found a weathered iron box buried deep among the roots. Inside, Whitmore's original will, spelling out that the cabin belonged to whoever could see past decay, to the beauty inside, and get this, that half its value should go to an arts fund for local kids. While we were still reeling, Jake called. Turns out he had a personal score with Victoria. She'd destroyed his parents with the same HOA tricks, fines upon fines, until she forced them out of their home. My fight wasn't just about art or history anymore. It was about justice. Of course, Victoria made her move. She showed up at my door, calm as ever. "Mr. Bennett, let's talk before this gets ugly." She waved her heritage clause, a document supposedly giving the HOA power to seize culturally valuable properties. But Jake found the flaw. Her association was just a private company, not the Old Town government. The clause didn't apply. With that ammo, I took the story, public live stream from the cabin, showed the carvings, the will, the drone shots, called out the HOA's abuses. The story went viral, and suddenly I wasn't the outsider, I was the local hero. The final showdown came at the hearing. Victoria's team threw everything they had, lawyers, experts, PowerPoint slides, but Jake demolished their claims point by point. Eleanor's evidence painted the Ashworths as multi-generational con artists, not civic leaders. When I showed the roof's star map and read from Whitmore's will, the room went dead silent. Then when Jake presented testimony from families Victoria had crushed with fines and foreclosures, you could feel the anger turn. The board ruled unanimously. Victoria's claim was bogus. The HOA had no power and my ownership stood. The crowd cheered, but Victoria just leaned in and hissed, "This isn't over." But it was at least for her. Days later, state and federal investigators swarmed her office. Turns out her HOA racket stretched across 3 counties. She went down hard, charged with fraud, racketeering, you name it. Her family's grip on Pine Ridge ended overnight, and a whole bunch of properties stolen through shady fines were returned to the original owners. And what about the cabin? Smithsonian valued it at $12 million. But following Whitmore's wishes, I set up the Elias Whitmore Arts Education Foundation with half the value, scholarships, woodworking programs for kids, a new cultural center right here in Pine Ridge. The cabin itself became a national landmark, open for artists, historians, and anyone who wants to see what real craftsmanship looks like. Funny thing is, the biggest victory wasn't the money or even the historic designation. It was watching a 12-year-old named Emma, whose family Victoria once tried to ruin, learned to cut joinery in the same beams Whitmore had signed so long ago. That's what real legacy looks like, you know. Not a name on a deed, but hands passing down a craft, a community waking up to protect what's truly valuable. So if you've ever stared down an HOA bully or watched some smug official try to steal what you've built, don't just roll over. You've got more rights, more history, and maybe more allies than you think. Like if you're rooting for the underdog, share your own stories in the comments. And tell me, when does a house become a home when you own it? Or when you fight to keep it alive for the next generation? Because in the end, true ownership isn't about paperwork. It's about stewardship, about protecting something bigger than yourself. And that, my friends, is worth more than any number on a price tag.